So I just went to see Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, and I have a lot of thoughts I want to get through. First off, I want to start by saying that when it comes to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I'm very familiar with the Peter Jackson trilogy, loved it a lot as a kid, always watched the extended editions. Actually watched through all 3 extended editions earlier this year, just because I got the feeling for it. And I've also read the books, but that was a very long time ago now. Anyways, I remember initially hearing about them announcing a Lord of the Rings anime movie, and at first I was pretty skeptical. I don't love all these Western properties doing anime adaptations just because they feel like it's popular to just be anime. And there's a few reasons I think they're doing that are not just that anime has a wide audience in the West. We'll get into that a little later. I think there's some more underhanded things that were done to make this movie. But in general, I don't really like the idea of major studios in America aping the aesthetic of anime to make things more marketable towards young people. I think that's really looking at the appeal anime has in the wrong way. Speaking as someone who loves anime and reviews it a lot, I don't watch anime because of its aesthetic. I watch anime because it tells a lot of interesting stories and can do a lot of interesting things that you don't see in Western animation. And there's still a lot of great things in Western animation that I love and adore. And I actually think one of the things that's really interesting is, coming at a project, an animated project, with your own sense of style and understanding and knowing what kind of story you're going to tell, and building an animation style around that, right? And this isn't even specific to the War of the Rohirrim. This goes for any type of anime project I've seen over the past few years, whether it be the Marvel projects, Blade Runner, the new Fooly Coolies. There's just this level of trying to chase something and not understanding what it is that people really love and enjoy about the Rick and Morty anime is a perfect example, right? There's this cheapening to the whole medium of animation when you look at it's hard to call it a subgenre because there's so many genres inside of anime because it's just Japanese animation. But taking Japanese animation and just boiling it down to an aesthetic, I think on a lot of levels is just something that I don't personally find very appealing. One of the few instances where I feel like this was actually handled well was in Scout Pilgrim Takes Off last year. And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of passion and heart into that I think comes from a very genuine place as opposed to what we're going to talk about with Lord of the Rings. But we'll get back to all that in a little bit here. First off, gotta just briefly explain what this story is even about. So this takes place 200 years before Bilbo Baggins found the One Ring. The story follows Hera, the daughter of Helm Hammerhand, the king of Rohan, and his dispute with one of his lords who wants to marry their son to Hera so that he can gain more control and influence over Rohan, which Helm is very, very resistant to, and takes this as an insult, which eventually down the line leads to a war between Helm Hammerhand and some of his lords who are rebelling against him for various reasons that aren't really important for this summary. Again, the story is mainly focused around Hera and her wanting to be an actual player in the world around her, not wanting to be in a subservient role to her father, because the whole thing is based around people wanting to marry her off and her just not wanting to be married at all, about her not wanting to live a life really as a noble at all. She just wants to be free, which isn't that crazy of a storyline. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of this story that's not directly based on the Tolkien stuff isn't all that really interesting, because this is based off of something that Tolkien wrote. He wrote a little bit in the appendices about how Helm's Deep got its name, which is of course for Helm Hammerhand, and the whole plot of this movie basically is just the whole background why Helm's Deep has its name. Now I'm not going to get into the details of the plot or the differences between what the movie shows and the appendices. There's a lot of great videos and people who are far more experts on Lord of the Rings lore than I am that you can go check out. I'm gonna actually link a few that I watched that are pretty interesting, that I watched after I saw the movie. I didn't want to research anything about this before I went in because I wanted to just have the movie tell me its story, digest it as its own piece of media, this wasn't connected at all, it's its own story in the world of Lord of the Rings. And then go see, what they based it off of and what the differences were. And I'll say that there's some decent parts of it that are, if you're wanting to see an adaptation of what Tolkien wrote, there's some parts of it that are really going to adapt it pretty well, but you may be frustrated with some of the changes, but I mean, that's pretty par for the course for the whole Peter Jackson movies anyway, because they're pretty different than the books in a lot of ways. But that's not really the point that I want to get to. The plot in and of itself, the plot on its own, as a movie, I think is passable. It's fine. You know, you could do more things to elevate it if you had some different dialogue in there, if you had some more interesting action scenes in there. It's a very passable plot. It's something you could, it's a loose framework that you could hang a decent movie around, right? Does this actually form a decent movie? No, not really, in my opinion. Like, this isn't bad. Like, this isn't a bad movie. I didn't walk out of the theater like, what did I just watch? It just wasted over 2 hours of my life. It's an unfulfilling movie that's passable, and if you have an itch for Lord of the Rings lore, then yeah, sure, it's a good watch. It's decent. You know, the animation isn't bad, but as someone who came into this wanting to see, like, I'm an anime fan, right? I am an anime reviewer. So I was coming into this partially, you know, to evaluate, you know, what this means for the industry. Because, you know, it's really exciting to see an anime film get a large release in the United States. Even if it's based off a Western property, still, that's interesting. But I think it's not a really good representation of anime. It feels like, I mean, the writing was all done by the Western side of it. A lot of the scriptwriters for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson's trilogy, were involved with it, and executive producers for it. Peter Jackson himself was an executive producer. And I think a lot of the movies, like, production design was fine. I didn't like a lot of the animation itself. There wasn't anything that really excited me. I talk a lot about anime that like really excite me, and one of the biggest ones is Frieren. Frieren, another incredible fantasy series, a TV fantasy series, right? It's done by Madhouse, so like there's some really great, and the direction and staff behind this are great, right? But there's a lot of things that can really excite me about an animated work, and it doesn't always have to have like the best animation all the way through, but it has to have some moments that really draw me in, really make me feel like you're doing something different, like there's some form of, like in the art of animation, something that's exciting to me. And I didn't get this in that movie. There's some like first person point of view shots they try to do, which I don't think work that well. You can really feel kind of jankiness. There's one scene in particular really early on where one of the lords is meeting with Helm. His movements just felt so strange to me. They felt off, like they didn't feel timed correctly. And that wasn't an issue throughout the whole movie, but that was an issue in that scene where I just didn't feel right. Like the motions weren't clicking. The backgrounds also were a mixed bag. There were some inside of buildings, like traditional backgrounds that were pretty all right, but like the beginning of the movie has like this transition into like anime, right? And the backgrounds that it shows for like the outdoors, for the plains of Rohan are rough. They're rough. I don't want to say the animation's bad though, because it's not bad. There's some scenes where like, especially in the fight scenes, that look pretty good. Helm has some really good fight scenes. This guy is so incredibly strong and it's impressive. There's some good scenes with that. There is some solid animation work, but there's not enough that makes me feel like this is an anime movie, you know? Anime movies, especially if you're in the anime community, anime movies have a bar to them, right? If we're just talking movies based off like anime series, just like spin-off movies, then you've got things like Dragon Ball Z Broly, JJK Movie Zero, or you know, the Mugen Train, right? All of these movies are not like passion projects in and of themselves. They are a part of a franchise. I feel like it's a more fair comparison to War of the Rohirrim. Like I wouldn't want to compare Your Name to this because that is a Makoto Shinkai movie. That's an entirely different ballpark, or a Miyazaki movie, right? There's something different going on there. There's an artistic vision behind films like Your Name or The Boy and the Heron, as opposed to something like Mugen Train, which is an installment of a franchise, right? Which I think the War of the Rohirrim, I think that's a fair comparison to make, right? They're installments of franchises trying to make a big production. And can you live up to what you expect from that kind of series, from this franchise? And there's like maybe one or two scenes that I thought were truly interesting or exciting, and you know, I do applaud them for doing horses well. Like, the horse animation was great. The elephant animation was not. I know they're not called elephants. I don't care right now. But the like horse animation was good, and that's really hard. You know, there's a lot of cool things that were done there. I actually looked into the background of the animation afterwards, and they had like the actors perform or wearing mocap suits, you know, for a lot of their performances. And then like they had that translated into the Unreal Engine. And then you had the animators in Japan not rotoscope it, but like animate based off of that as like a reference, which I think is an interesting idea. It's fine. It's fine. The animation is passable. Honestly, it's hard to blame. I'm not blaming the animation studio because like they did not have that much time to work on this. This movie was fast-tracked. This gets into actually one of my biggest problems with the movie, which doesn't have anything really to do with when you sit down and watch the movie, you're not going to know this. But this was fast-tracked so that New Line Cinema could keep hold of the rights to Lord of the Rings movies. This was a rights movie. You know, like this was just something they had to rush out so that they wouldn't lose the rights and they can make more Lord of the Rings movies going forward, which I think is cheap and I think speaks to why they made this anime. I think more than wanting to appeal to like young men, you know, who like anime, more than wanting to just, you know, find a different audience, I think the reason they went with anime is because they could crunch those workers and they could get it out fast. It'd be a lot faster than actually making like a full live action movie. That would take a lot more time, you know, to actually make a decent movie like that. You can make a decent movie on an anime scale on a much lower budget because you don't have to pay Japanese animators nearly as much because you can crunch them or you can make other people crunch them. I've seen some other anime YouTubers talk about this, but you have these Western production companies that go over to Japan and say that we want to make a product here because they can do it quicker and they don't have to pay their animators nearly as much because there's not as strong labor laws and just people don't pay animators in Japan all that much, or they pay them a lot less than they do in America. And American animators aren't even paid super well. So that's saying something. It's bad out there. It's bad. And I've covered this in a few videos about the production and work side of it towards animators in Japan. It's not good. It's not a great environment. And I feel like this movie is a part of that wheel of exploitation that's occurring there to retain the rights to Lord of the Rings movies, right? So everything that comes from this, the fact that the movie isn't performing all that well, the fact that the movie feels like it doesn't have a really strong artistic vision outside of being the anime version of Peter Jackson's movies. The movie isn't feel like it's trying to say anything. It's not trying to be revolutionary in the field of animation. It's not doing anything new or even a lot of things that are really exciting. There's a lot of moments where you don't see characters when they're talking, which is the classic, you know, anime sneaky thing that you do so you don't have to, you save on the animation, right? Which is not something you want out of an anime movie. You don't want to see those kind of shortcuts that are happening, which again, this was fast-tracked. This was not the normal time frame for an anime film to take. So it's unfortunate, it's underwhelming, and I think more than that, it's a testament to how Hollywood studios view anime as a way to get something done cheaply and quickly that's a decent enough product that you might make a profit off of it to retain the rights to a film franchise. They see the ability of Japanese companies to do something quick that looks good or even great for a low cost. That's what they viewed this as. And I hate seeing a medium that I love so much viewed in such a cold way. You know, entertainment's a business, Hollywood's a business, the anime industry is a business, but when you go to the movies, you're supposed to be able to forget about this, and unfortunately, it was all that I could think of. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. I've got plenty of other videos on a bunch of anime that I do actually like. I like my video on Frieren, one of the best fantasy series in the past few years, or Delicious in Dungeon, another great fantasy series. This is actually a really great year for fantasy outside of War of the Rohirrim, so check out those videos if you want to see me talk about some really good series that might, you know, it might scratch that little itch for you. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day, a great night, or whatever it is you're having, and stay rad.